Mr. Speaker, I seek your permission to speak from a seat other than my own.
You may go ahead.
May it please you, Mr. Speaker. In making my maiden presentation to the sectoral debate, I want to congratulate you on your elevation to the presiding chair. Permit me to also congratulate each member on both sides of the House on his or her election, whether for the first time or a subsequent occasion. As a newcomer, Mr. Speaker, I must say how pleased I am that in spite of the efforts to keep me in the other place where I served for 2 terms, here I am in this place. I deem it a privilege and honor to stand as the proud member from St. James West Central. Through you, Mr. Speaker, I welcome those constituents. They're here, including my councillor caretakers from the Granville, Spring Garden, and Mount Salem divisions. And members of my management team headed by Mr. David Neilbaugh. They have taken the trip over to see their MP in action. Mr. Speaker, allow me also to greet those who are watching or listening from elsewhere. I'm very, very grateful to the hardworking team who gave so generously of their time and resources to ensure my presence here. I see Mr. Robert Russell Sr. in the gallery. When he took the decision to manage my campaign, he was told that it would either be his political resurrection or burial, but there he is.
He has been resurrected.
While I will not, on this occasion, name each team member, Mr. Speaker, I want to especially thank the honorable member from St. James Northwest, Minister Horace Jang. It was he who guided me to the constituency, and he has provided and continue to provide invaluable support. I want to also thank former Prime Minister Bruce Golden, who helped me in the campaign, and who, by recruiting me to political service in 2009, effectively added me to the pool of candidates for this place. I want to thank, Mr. Speaker, one Miss Anne-Marie Chin, who took the leap of faith with me to St. James West Central, and whom the constituents dub their deputy MP. Mr. Speaker, I thank the Almighty God who has begun this work in me and who I know is faithful to complete it. In so doing, I acknowledge the many, many companions on the journey. My family, including my circle of very close friends, continue to safeguard me. And I do pay attention to friends and family. My husband, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Justice Ian Ford, who is present in the gallery, is an exceptional man. His enduring love and unwavering support, wise counsel, help to enable me every single day. Mr. Speaker, in the past, the St. James West Central constituency has swung between the ruling Jamaica Labour Party and the opposition party in choosing their member of parliament. In entrusting their representation to me now, they have expressed their disappointments as well as their current expectations. While the constituents and I continue to reason, to renegotiate some of those expectations, I have given them my commitment to do the job they have elected me to do. At the same time, I have made it clear to them that I will not help them by doing for them what they should do for themselves. However, I will always work in their best interest. I will work across political and other divides. For those who do not share my private sense of morality, I will still represent their concerns at the decision-making tables. I will do everything in my power to leave them better than I found them. And Mr. Speaker, I am here to represent all of them, not just those who voted for me or those who support my party. While I have been in the constituency every week since being elected, I'm yet to revisit every community in which I campaigned. I am thankful, though, that so many have graciously shown me their kind understanding. They appreciate that having elected me as part of government, I am further entrusted with additional responsibilities of a very technical nature, critical to the proper and effective functioning of government. Those who want to see me every day in the constituency are beginning to realize that I have to maintain a presence in Kingston, where the seat of government is located and where the decisions are taken on their issues. Last week, Mr. Speaker, last Saturday, July 2, when I was in the constituency, I went to the New Ramble community of the Spring Garden Division. I cannot fully describe just how grief-stricken I was while there. The night before, gunmen went on a shooting rampage, wounding 9, 3 of whom fatally so, including a student of the St. James High School. What I saw, Mr. Speaker, and what was relayed to me by residents, coupled with the other killings in St. James and across the island, tell me that we are at that point where enough is enough. Here is the simple truth. Our beloved island home can no longer afford the high and increasing cost of the crime problem. We have to cut it. The people of Jamaica cannot prosper in this high murder rate. Businesses cannot make the kind of profits they should with this high murder rate. The government cannot fulfill its commitment to grow the economy and create jobs with this high murder rate. We have to do something about it. It is not beyond us to find both the will and the way to do something about it. Later in my presentation, I will share some of the steps this Andrew Holness-led government will take in short order. And Mr. Speaker, I want all Jamaicans at home and abroad, and all friends of Jamaica, to understand that this is not business as usual. While we fully appreciate the help of our international partners, we do not intend to continue to posture ourselves on bended knees, begging, while being scoffed at. We intend to rise to our feet and take back our country. The composition of this Parliament is instructive, Mr. Speaker. It provides us with an unprecedented opportunity to cooperate more than we compete. I want our supporters outside of Parliament to understand what this means. Every Jackman, woman, boy and girl has a role to play. We must own the problems and work together to implement meaningful solutions while shunning partisan upmanship. I want to assure the people of St. James West Central that at the constituency level, I will work with my predecessor in the office of Member of Parliament or whomever else caretakes on behalf of the supporters of the opposition party. I will work with the agencies of government, with the non-government agencies, with the private sector, with the faith-based communities, with our international partners. I will work with everyone who is committed to being part of the solution. In this place, Mr. Speaker, I will collaborate across the aisles. And in my role as Attorney General, I will fair and fearlessly ensure that the government is properly advised. On this note, I turn to the portfolio entrusted to me by the most honorable Prime Minister, who unfortunately is not here today because he is currently in the Cooperative Republic of Guyana at the CARICOM Conference of Heads of Government. I sincerely thank him for the confidence he has reposed in me to recommend my appointment as Attorney General of Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, I'm honored to be part of the team on this side to serve with my fellow Jamaicans under the leadership of Prime Minister Andrew Holness. I come to the role of Attorney General in my 20th year as an attorney at law, and with significant experience and perspective gained from serving at both the private and public bar, on the bench, and in the legislative and executive branches of government. Mr. Speaker, many of my St. James West Central constituents say they don't really know or fully understand what the Attorney General does. I crave your indulgence to explain, but with one caveat. Most of the work that I do as Attorney General is protected by lawyer-client privilege, and therefore not everything can be shared. But insofar as what can be shared, Mr. Speaker, I want them to know that the Attorney General is the principal legal advisor to the government of Jamaica, protector of the public interest, what they call parens patriae, literally parent of the fatherland, and head of the legal profession, leader of the bar. The Attorney General's chambers is headed by the Attorney General with the assistance of the Solicitor General, and it is the principal law office of the Crown. Civil proceedings by and against the Crown must be instituted by and against the Attorney General. The Chamber provides legal advice and representation to all ministries and departments of government on civil matters in all courts, from the parish court to the Supreme Court to the Court of Appeal to the Judicial Committee of Her Majesty's Privy Council. Mr. Speaker, subject always to the direction of the Attorney General, the Solicitor General may perform any of the duties and exercise any of the functions of the Attorney General. The Attorney General attends Cabinet, and the Solicitor General attends meetings of the Permanent Secretary's Board. However, I want the constituents to know, Mr. Speaker, that the Chambers is not a ministry on its own. It is part of the Ministry of Justice. It does not have its own funds or its own budget. It is part of the Ministry of Justice. The Chamber currently has a staff complement of 79 persons, comprising 41 attorneys at law, excluding the Attorney General, who constitutionally must also be an attorney at law, 38 members of the administrative and support services. There are also 3 part-time consultants. But let me hasten to say, Mr. Speaker, this staff complement is woefully inadequate for the assigned workload. I have established a senior executive committee made up of the Attorney General, the Solicitor General, and the Deputy Solicitors General, with whom I discuss matters arising for action from Cabinet. The Chamber continues to be managed by an executive committee comprising the Solicitor General, and she's here, Mrs. Nicole Foster Pusey, Queen's Counsel, the Deputy Solicitors General, Dr. Kathy Ann Brown, also here, and Mrs. Marlene Aldred, who unfortunately is ill and absent. 6 directors of the legal divisions and the director of the administrative division. The Attorney General's Chambers.
Attorney General, will you have a seat? I have requested the Marshal Members, the House is still in session. I have requested the Marshal to take care of what is happening there. Well, members, could you leave it to us? The Marshal and the security will take care of that, while members could allow us to continue the sitting of the House.
Those guys are still at practice. But let me tell them, you need 6.
The House will suspend this session for 10 minutes, that we can return in 10 minutes. House is suspended for 10 minutes. Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, thank you for the indulgence. The visitor in the gallery is actually from my constituency, from the Wales Pond community of the Spring Garden Division, and I thank colleagues for assisting, and they're taking care. Mr. Speaker, before you so graciously rose, I was indicating that the Chambers is divided, structured into 5 functional legal divisions: commercial affairs, constitutional and legislative affairs, general legal advice, international affairs, and litigation. The commercial affairs division advises the government of Jamaica on all commercial matters, including representing the government in negotiations with national and international corporations, national and multinational commercial institutions, particularly in the areas of finance and taxation, and in negotiating international loan agreements, including those with the World Bank and other and foreign commercial banks, and also dealing with bilateral agreements with foreign states. It advises on the issue of government paper, project financing, and privatization. Members of the Commercial Affairs Division also sit on numerous divestment committees and enterprise teams. Thanks to the former Attorney General, Mr. Patrick Atkinson, Queen's Counsel, and with the kind assistance of the Development Bank of Jamaica and the Planning Institute of Jamaica, through the Foundations for Competitiveness and Growth project, there is a commercial task force within the chambers. It assists the Commercial Division to provide urgent legal advice on important strategic investment projects, privatization, and divestments. One senior legal consultant was hired in May 2015. She has been of immense assistance in expediting crucial commercial projects and in training members of the division. The Foundations for Competitiveness and Growth project has further committed to fund an additional legal consultant, as well as secretarial and administrative staff, to members of the task force. I invite members of the bar to look out for the pending advertisements for the consultant posts. Mr. Speaker, I ask that you join me in thanking the Foundations for Competitiveness and Growth project. Turning to the Constitutional and Legislative Affairs Division, this assists the government to implement its legislative agenda and to ensure that laws enacted are consistent with the Constitution of Jamaica. This division reviews cabinet submissions, bills and draft regulations, and also advises cabinet. It has played an instrumental role in ensuring that the legislative benchmarks in the agreement with the International Monetary Fund were met. Generally, it also advises the staff and members of Parliament on proposed legislation and parliamentary procedure. The division is primarily responsible for advice on matters relating to the Access to Information Act and representing the government on appeals before the Access to Information Appeals Tribunal. It advises the responsible minister under the Town and Country Planning Act, Local Government Act, Beach Control Act, and the Natural Resources Conservation Authority Act. Mr. Speaker, the other division is the General Legal Advice Division, and I see the director of the division, Ms. Candice Rochester, here. It provides legal advice to all ministries, departments, and agencies of the government on a wide breadth of legal matters, including, very importantly, statutory interpretation. It represents the government at the Industrial Disputes Tribunal, the Police and Public Services Commission, conducts arbitrations on behalf of the government, and has also marshaled evidence at commissions of inquiry. Mr. Speaker, the International Affairs Division, headed by Deputy Solicitor Dr. Kathian Brown, advises the government on all matters involving international law, the negotiation and drafting of treaties and other international agreements and protocols, the performance of Jamaica's obligations under them. Matters handled by the International Affairs Division cover a broad spectrum of issues, including international trade and investment, CARICOM, the environment, international security issues such as mutual legal assistance, drug trafficking, arms trafficking, human trafficking, corruption, terrorism, human rights, air law and policy, law of the sea, and maritime delimitation. Interestingly, Mr. Speaker, Jamaica has maritime boundaries with 6 countries, but most of these boundaries are yet to be defined. The division is also heavily involved in the Cannabis Licensing Authority work, and it has expended a significant amount of work on the arbitration initiated by Noranda Bauxite Limited against the government of Jamaica. The successful outcome of the arbitration for the government is well known, but as you know, the award remains confidential. Still, attorneys in the division represent Jamaica before the United Nations and its specialized agencies, before the OAS, CARICOM, and other international organizations. A member of the International Affairs Division also sits on the Eligibility Committee, which considers asylum applications. The division has also handled a matter heard by the Caribbean Court of Justice in its original jurisdiction. Turning to the Litigation Division. The Litigation Division, Mr. Speaker, is responsible for the conduct of all civil litigation instituted against and by the government of Jamaica. Assigned attorneys represent the government in all courts, and they also appear before the Industrial Disputes Tribunal. The division has been involved in a number of complex cases involving a challenge to the constitutionality of the Proceeds of Crime Act, rare requirements applicable to attorneys at law, various matters involving the Independent Commission of Investigations, INDICOM, a challenge to the validity of the license issued to the Jamaica Public Service Company, challenge to the constitutionality of the anti-buggery provisions of the Offences Against the Person Act, claims arising from the fire which occurred at Armadale facility in March 2009, and a claim requiring the interpretation of certain sections of the Proceeds of Crime Act insofar as they allegedly impact the presumption of innocence and the right to counsel of one's choice. The period April 2015 to June 2016 has been a very busy and productive one for the chambers. For each week in the court's terms, the litigation department has handled an average of 50 mediation, court, and tribunal appearances. Court attendances cover the span of the parish courts across the island, the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal. And the Solicitor General and Director of State Proceedings also argued a matter before the Judicial Committee of Her Majesty's Privy Council. Attorneys in the division also frequently handled matters before the Industrial Disputes Tribunal. Mr. Speaker, I have heard the complaints about non-attendance in court by some counsel from the chambers. I assure the public that I am working to make that a thing of the past. Court attendance is a priority and must be treated accordingly. Mr. Speaker, I also intend to go to court at all levels to deal with pending and new cases. Mr. Speaker, the Attorney General carries out numerous other functions. I did say that not everything can be spoken of publicly because lawyer-client privilege attaches. But let me just say, Mr. Speaker, for example, under the Patent Act, the Attorney General's certificate that an application for letters patent is legal in order is a prerequisite for a grant. I put my colleagues on notice, Mr. Speaker, that this Attorney General will exercise any of the many functions vested in her office should the need arise. These include initiating proceedings on own initiative in respect of certain statutory duties, take action to restrain a corporation from exceeding its statutory powers, prevent the continuation of a public nuisance, enforce public rights. And I want everyone to listen to this one. This Attorney General will make applications pursuant to the Vexatious Actions Act in relation to any person who habitually and persistently, without reasonable ground, institutes vexatious proceedings, thereby further clogging the courts. And I urge you all, take me seriously. Take me seriously. Mr. Speaker, the new Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedom 2010 has fueled numerous constitutional claims by citizens against each other and against other juristic persons. In fact, the Charter expanded the contract between the state and citizen. Once upon a time, it only facilitated an action between citizen and the state. Now, the contract is open to citizen and citizens. And since the implementation of the Charter, the enactment, a number of cases have been before the court. The Chambers has played a significant role, appearing amicus curiae to assist the court to chart new legal course. At times, constitutional issues arise in appeal for the first time. In those cases, the Court of Appeal has invited the Chambers to assist in providing useful perspective due to the expertise of our litigation and constitutional divisions. But you know, Mr. Speaker, this often comes at significant cost in terms of human resources, time, and legal research. Mr. Speaker, I have already reiterated the call to strengthen the Chambers. I will further the steps taken under the previous administration to review the current capacity to handle the extremely heavy and ever-increasing workload. Immediately after my appointment to the Office of Attorney General, I was flooded with numerous calls, letters, emails, and requests for meetings. With a very open mind, Mr. Speaker, I've listened very carefully to the many views expressed about the Chambers. And while I should like to think that everyone who has taken the time to contact me means well, I have to say the jury is still out. Notwithstanding the concerns, the complaints, Mr. Speaker, I have found a hard-working, committed team of varying levels of expertise, stretched to their limits. Mr. Speaker, in spite of the real challenges they face, they go beyond the call of duty. And believe me, Mr. Speaker, the workload is heavy. The turnaround time is short, and the demands are great. I intend to work very closely with the team at the Chambers. I will make changes where necessary, but always with a view to better enable the Chambers to provide legal services of the highest standard in an efficient, timely, and professional manner. The previous administration took the decision to pursue centralization of legal services as a plank in the public sector modernization program. In January 2016, the former cabinet approved the proposed framework, having previously included it in the Government of Jamaica's November 2015 letter of intent to the International Monetary Fund. With the assistance of Justice Canada, the then administration committed to implement within 6 months of adoption shared legal services within central government, starting with legal services. our Cabinet will shortly review the proposal and consider the way forward. Centralized legal services are aimed at increased efficiencies, consistent and quality legal advice and services throughout government, timely delivery of legal services, shared knowledge and openness, rewarding career paths and opportunities, long-term economies of scale, and operational flexibility. The proposal is that over time, legal officers falling within the ministries and departments will become part of the chambers. They will be authorized to address certain matters without the need to refer them to head office. Standards and protocols will be put in place to ensure consistency and quality of the legal advice. This, in all likelihood, Mr. Speaker, will ensure speedier advice and assist in giving head office the ability to focus on reducing the backlog of matters already within the chamber. Indeed, quality advice is at the heart of the reform. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to advise that the Government of Canada, through the JUST program, continues to support the efforts at centralization of legal services, and they are in the final stages of preparing a phased implementation plan for presentation to Cabinet. The Chambers, though, Mr. Speaker, is in urgent need of additional resources to successfully tackle the heavy workload in a timely way. Through you, Mr. Speaker. In 2000, there were 38 attorneys at law in the chambers. In 2002, the civil procedure rules were passed, and they made drastic changes to the conduct of civil litigation by front-loading the majority of the work and also by providing sanctions for non-compliance. Over time, the quantity, nature, and complexity of the work in the litigation and other divisions have increased significantly. However, Mr. Chairman, as of July 2016, there are 41 attorneys, including the Solicitor General, an increase of 3 vis-à-vis the increase in the number of cases being handled. This is not enough. At this point, in July 2016, we approximate that the Attorney General's chambers has over 20,000 active files. Over 20,000 active files. A heavy workload, Mr. Speaker. I propose to press for a special initiative to provide additional administrative and legal human resources for the chambers and the litigation division in particular. This urgently needed initiative will form a part of the proposals to be placed before Cabinet as it considers the way forward for centralization of legal services. We will consider whatever will ensure that quality legal service is provided in a timely and professional manner. As the Chamber expands to meet the increasing need of the government, we will be renting additional space to accommodate additional staff and resources. But, Mr. Speaker, here is what pleases me. There are plans afoot to refurbish and restore the former location of the chambers at 79 Barry Street, downtown. This will return the chambers to its rightful place in Justice Square. And I look forward to updating the House as we progress. And I'm sure the Honourable Minister of Justice will also do so, Mr. Speaker. I now turn to an issue of major concern to anyone who has successfully sued the government of Jamaica in the name of the Attorney General: judgment debts. I hear the cries, Mr. Speaker. I know many judgment creditors have been waiting for a long time. As at the end of financial year 2015-16, not the current one, the records of the Ministry of Justice reflected that arising from that financial year, the government was liable to pay to judgment creditors the sum of just under 280 million Jamaican dollars and just under 182,000 US dollars, approximately 302 million, does not include interest. As of June 27, the amount due for payment out is just under 462 million and just over 396,000 US dollars. Expressed in Jamaican dollars, it's just over $512 million. But, Mr. Speaker, this figure does not include judgment debt interest, which is currently 6% per annum and runs on judgment sums from the date of judgment until payment. The over 500 million outstanding as of June 27 includes amounts which are outstanding for the financial year 2014-2015. The approved provision in the budget of the Chambers for 2016-2017 is $343,177,000. This sum will cover some of the debt liability which arose in the financial year 15-16. As of June 27, 2016, only 3 months into the new financial year, the amount provided in the 16-17 budget is already exceeded by the amount owed by just under 170 million, and this does not include interest. Mr. Speaker, the Chambers and the Ministry of Justice have agreed on a system of payment on a first-in, first-out basis. But I will be reviewing this system to take into account exceptional circumstances that may warrant special consideration. Given the gravity of the situation, a special submission was considered by Cabinet on the need for additional funds to settle government liability. I am pleased that Cabinet has indicated a favourable consideration and will also look at including the satisfaction of judgment debts as part of the overall debt reduction strategy. Mr. Speaker, we may also have to look, though, at revisiting the Judicature Supreme Court rates of interest on Judgment Debts Order 2006. But I think before we make any move, we will discuss the matter with the bar. The government cannot afford any further liability for acts and omissions of its servants. An analysis of settlements and judgment debts referred to the Ministry of Justice for payment in fiscal year 15-16 has revealed that approximately 46% arose from police action, which gave rise to claims of false imprisonment, malicious prosecution, assault and battery, and claims for constitutional redress. Another 34% arose from accidents and personal injury claims. Medical negligence is also an area of concern. Mr. Speaker, the statistics we have are telling, and I have to say that we have commenced a dialogue with the Office of the Commissioner of Police to discuss the war entail. We'll also be meeting with our other clients, such as the Ministry of Health. We cannot afford to incur liability at such a fast pace. Mr. Speaker, the Chambers has been a place of choice for attorneys who wish to be exposed to interesting, challenging, and complex matters while receiving consistent training and supervision. In recent years, however, the rate of attrition has been high, it has been difficult to retain the services of many attorneys after they have received excellent training from the chambers. To better understand the underlying reasons, the chambers engaged the services of the Management Institute for National Development, MIND, to conduct an employee satisfaction and engagement survey. Now that the survey is complete, Mr. Speaker, the team and I will closely examine its findings and recommendations and take all necessary steps to address existing problems. The Chamber promotes teamwork, employee involvement, and camaraderie. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the week of June 13 to 17 was marked as Health and Wellness Week in the chambers. Employees were provided with health tests, stress-relieving massages, and information on Zika V. We thank the Ministry of Health for partnering with us to provide pamphlets and other information for distribution to the staff.
Good government.
Time does not permit on this occasion, Mr. Speaker, to speak about all that we are doing to improve our delivery of service. However, I should let you know that this year the Chamber will launch its own website. A contract has already been signed with the GIS, and the Chambers is in the process of providing the GIS the information required to populate the website. Before I close, I want to go back to the crime problem, Mr. Speaker. It is no secret that crime is Jamaica's #1 binding constraint to growth. Among the categories of crime, murder poses a particular threat. This, too, is no secret. In its presentation for the 2016 Article 4 mission, the IMF reminded us that economic growth in Jamaica has been stagnating since the 1970s. Over 40 years later, Jamaica's potential growth is a mere 1%. However, Mr. Speaker, their research tells us that if we could just bring the murder rate down to global average, growth could be increased by 1.6%, putting it moderately. Imagine what could happen if we succeed in this. Mr. Speaker, the wider justice system has a special role to play, but the police and courts must be further equipped to respond in a fresh way. The Honourable Minister of Justice and I are collaborating on numerous issues. We are very mindful, Mr. Speaker, that we have passed many laws over many years, promising much while delivering very little. In some areas, we are very mindful that laws by themselves will not bring the kind of progress we desperately need. We're also mindful, Mr. Speaker, of the implementation and enforcement deficit that plague us. Nonetheless, we have to act, and our action must include some legislative measures. Mr. Speaker, to successfully tackle the murder problem, some of the fundamentally guaranteed rights and freedom, which Mr. Speaker, to successfully tackle the murder problem, some of the fundamentally guaranteed rights and freedoms may have to be abrogated, abridged, or infringed because, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the evidence we are examining
The member's time for speaking has expired.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the member's time be extended by 5 minutes to allow the member to complete her presentation.
The question is that the member's time be extended by 5 minutes. Those who are in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Mrs. Forte, you may go ahead.
Grateful for the kind
Before you
indulgence.
proceed, members, we have 5 minutes to go on this presentation. I wish to hear the Attorney General's conclusion. I'm asking both sides, listen to her, gallery want to hear. Mrs. Forte, may proceed.
Grateful, Mr. Speaker. As I was saying, to successfully tackle the murder problem, some of the fundamental rights and freedoms which we have guaranteed to our people may have to be abrogated, abridged, or infringed because the evidence we are examining, Mr. Speaker, convince us that such action may be demonstrably justified in this free and democratic society. I have already begun to discuss some of the proposals with the private bar and the public bar and the Honourable Chief Justice in her administrative role as head of the judiciary. While judicial discretion must be preserved and respected, Parliament, in the exercise of its powers to pass law for peace, order, and good government, will have to set the threshold for the consequences that will flow when people choose to murder and cause mayhem. Mr. Speaker, this Attorney General is advising the government very carefully. When we pass laws, they are presumed to be constitutional unless and until set aside by a court of competent jurisdiction. But we are prepared to pass the laws and have them tested in the courts because we must do something about the murder problem. So, Mr. Speaker, colleagues, let me say, we are going to touch the Bail Act again. We are going to touch the Criminal Justice Administration Act, the Jury Act, the Evidence Act, the Criminal Justice Plea Negotiation and Agreement Act, the Firearms Act, the Offences Against the Person Act, just to name a few. Mr. Speaker, we are going to make some radical changes. Right now, the sentiment is that no bail for murder unless self-defense arises on the Crown's case and the likelihood of an acquittal is high. Mr. Speaker, we are also thinking of abolishing jury trials for non-capital murder and go judge alone. Mr. Speaker, away with unsworn statement from the dock. It is unthinkable that this vestigial tale continues to wag in Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, in with notice of alibi, we must once and for all settle the Crown's right to appeal. Mr. Speaker, we will have to set up a special track to try murder matters. And in so doing, we will take into account the realities surrounding the scheduling of cases. Mr. Speaker, these are not ordinary times. We have to act. May God grant us the wisdom to discover the right, the will to choose it, and the strength to make it endure. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.